Welcome back to our channel. In this particular session, we are going to discuss about Microsoft Azure Resource Mover. So this is a very important tool. We are going to discuss in great details about this particular tool. We might have multiple part sessions of this particular tool because there are various scenarios we might be using this tool. So in this particular session, we are going to have this particular agenda covered. So we are going to discuss why Azure Resource Mover and what are the different use cases we might be able to use this tool. What are the different resources in Azure that could be subjected to migration or movement using this tool? And what are the different scenarios we have where we might be using this tool, and what are the different processes that are involved, and what are the different state of the resources when we are using this tool. Okay, so we will start with why Microsoft Azure Resource Mover. Okay, Azure Resource Mover, by the name, it clearly indicates its purpose, right? So if you have a scenario where you have to move a resource from one particular source to target or a destination, this particular tool is one of the primary tool that you can think of, or there are multiple options, but this is one of the primary tool of choice where you can use it for various scenarios. So this is a centralized console. It's a single hub where you can move resources across region, across subscriptions, across resource group, and this tool helps you to move the resources in a very organized way. It reduces a lot of time and complexity that is involved in moving the resource. For example, if you want to move a resource from one location to another location, earlier we might have to subject that particular resource for cloning or backup and restore or replication and so on. So it takes a lot of time. It's like a complicated process, but this resource mover, it makes the movement as simplified as it can be. Okay, so a simple and consistent experience can be felt when you are using this tool. So we are going to see the demo on how resource mover can be used for moving the resources. And when you're moving a resource, for example, if you have a virtual machine that needs to be moved from one region to another region, or one subscription to another subscription, virtual machine by default or by nature, it is not a separate resource, right? It is linked to multiple different Azure resources like operating system disk, data disk, public IP address, network interface card, network security group, and so on. So this particular resource, when you want to move that particular resource, this tool will also help you to validate what are the dependencies that are there for that particular resource, and it will give you the list of resources that needs to be moved together as a kind of complete package. And once after you move the resources successfully and validate and do all the testing, so once the testing is complete, you can also automatically delete those resources on the source side. See, even though the name says resource mover, so for a safety side, for a precautionary measure, what Microsoft does is they just do a copy of the resource. They replicate it. We'll have both the source as well as the destination. So it's up to us to go and delete the source once after we validate whether all the configuration and whether the features and functionalities are working as expected after the movement, right? So we'll have the source as well as the destination as part of this movement. Even though the tool says it is mover, it will have both source and destination. So we'll have to go and clean up the source after successful movement. Okay, we'll see that in practical shortly. And what are the different use cases we might have to use this tool? See, mostly Microsoft Azure is growing across different cities, geographical regions, and different regions are being launched year on year or quarter by quarter. They are adding more regions and they are covering more locations. So when a particular customer migrated to Azure maybe last year or in the history, like there maybe like the region was not available and they might have chosen a region which was closer to them. And now when a new region is being launched, what the customer can do is to improve the latency and get better or get closer, and to get closer to that particular customer, we can move the resources to the newly launched region. So that is the common use case. And a lot of organization have a lot of acquisitions going on, mergers, split, and they might have a new department that might have to be segregated from an existing department. So there will be a lot of changes that might be happening to respond to business requirement or business development. And we might also have a lot of different services and features newly getting added to a particular region. Earlier, that feature or functionality might not be available in that region. So we might have migrated the resource to a particular region earlier. Since now the feature or the functionalities is now available in the closest region, we can move the resources to that newly launched region. And sometimes we might have to move the data for meeting out with the data residency or data compliancy or data classification requirements. A lot of different geographical regions, they have their own compliancy requirement. In order to meet that, we might have to migrate or move the resources to meet that particular requirement. We might also have to move the resources if there are any challenges or errors in a particular region or in an availability zone for some reason. We can also use this tool for moving to fix any particular issue or error. And when there is a decommissioning happening, you can also move the resources out of the region which is getting decommissioned. So these are the common use cases. It's not the complete list of use cases. There are some other use cases you might get to understand when you are working for different customers. And these are the kind of resources that are that can be subjected to movement as on date. Maybe like this list will continue to grow, and you can see most of the commonly used resources like virtual machines, the disk, the network interface card, the availability options like the availability set, Azure Virtual Network, public IP address, network security group, load balancers, either it can be internal or public facing load balancer, databases, Elastic Pool within your Azure SQL database. All these can be moved using Azure Resource Mover. And you can see that Azure Spot VMs are specific to a particular region where you have a spare capacity. So you cannot move those resources because the Spot instances are subject to a particular availability zone or a region where we have capacity available, and the pricing will change if you are moving those resources. So Spot VMs are not currently supported because of the nature of the particular instance type, right? Whereas if you're moving Azure virtual machines or Azure databases, maybe like I'll show you how to move the Azure databases in a separate session. Because like when you're moving Azure databases, you might have to create a SQL VM or a SQL server on the destination region where you're migrating or where we are moving to. And on the source side, you also have to have a on the source side, you will have a database as well as a backend server which is hosting that particular database. So on the destination, we have to prepare the resource group as well as the database server which can hold that particular database. So we'll see that in practical. So now let's see what are the different resources that we can move with our resources we have in our environment. So this tool can be used for moving resources across geographical regions within Azure. You can use it for moving across different subscription, different resource group. Even you can use it for moving across different cloud environment. But mostly if you're migrating or moving resources between Azure cloud environment, like from public cloud to Azure government cloud or Azure China cloud or whatever. So between Azure cloud, generally Azure Site Recovery is much appropriate, as it provides a lot of additional options to roll back, and it is a much better tool because you are replicating from one cloud to another cloud. So Azure Site Recovery is a better tool for that particular use case. And if you're moving resources between availability zone in the same region, then site recovery is another option where it might be much faster compared to your resource mover hub. So resource mover is mainly used for moving resources across region, across subscription, across resource groups. So these are the three common cases where we use resource mover group. When it comes to moving resources between Azure cloud or availability zones in the same region, then site recovery service is a good option where it can be used for replicating and moving the resources from one source to destination. So some additional points or scenarios are listed down here. So move Azure resources between Azure regions using this particular Azure Resource Mover Hub. And when you are selecting the resources for migration, so the corresponding resource group is also automatically added when you are moving it. So let's see how this works in practical. So I've got some resources in different regions listed here. So some of the resources are in central India, some of them are in East US, some of them are in East US too, and so on. So I'll show you how to move resources from one geographical region to another region. So in order to do the migration or the movement, so you can just go to Azure Resource Mover. So this is the tool or the service that we are going to explore. So if you look at here, it has a dashboard on what are the different services which are getting moved and what and the status for each of them. And you can see there are three different options that are available. You can move resources across subscription, you can move resources across the resource group and different region. So when you're moving resources across subscription, the destination subscription has to be checked for access, the what are the different scripts that we are using, policies that we are using on the destination, and along with that, the billing for that particular resource will move to the new subscription. So that is something which we need to keep in consideration. Whereas if you're moving between resource groups, so that you have to just take care of the access control, because in the destination resource group, we need to check whether the access is the same as the source resource group, so that the access to the resources are intact. When you're moving from one region to another region, so the tool itself will identify all the dependencies and it will validate and it will provide you what are the different steps that you need to take when you're moving the resources across region. So we can go to the move options across region here, and the very first step what you have to do is you have to go and add the resources which you want to move. So you can just go and select the resources in this particular resources. You can just subscription, you can select this option or you can select the option at the bottom. Both of them are going to give you the same option. So it is showing you the different resources that are there in the supported region. And if you look at here, okay, so you can just go and close all the filters here, and then you can just cancel it. I think a lot of resources I've already selected it and it's already here. And just for easier understanding, you can see that there are certain resources that are listed down here. You have a network interface, you have a virtual network, you have a public IP address, and you also have network security group and so on. So if I want to migrate it, the very first step, you have to add the resources and it will get listed under the move option. Then what you can do is you can just select the resources that you want to move, and then you can prepare those resources for movement. So the very first step, you have to add it and then you have to validate them. See in the status, you can see that these resources are waiting for preparation. So we'll prepare these resources for movement, and then let's see if they can be moved or whether there are any challenges with that. Okay, so these resources are currently in East US probably. I will show you that, and we might migrate it to a different region. So this is what we are discussing here. So first we have to go and choose the resource, and whenever we are moving the resources from one source to destination, there are some metadata that are getting created, right? So what is the current status, which resources are already prepared, what are the resources which are yet to be validated, what are the resources which is already migrated or moved, and which are the ones which we need to clean up. So all these metadata information will be getting stored in a Cosmos DB and a Azure Blob Storage account. But there is no customer information that will be getting stored on this particular metadata. It is just for facilitating the movement and to track and see what is the current status. It is for monitoring and tracking. Okay, so the metadata information does not store any customer data, and generally the metadata gets stored in two different locations for meeting out with the GDPR requirements in the European region, and you also have East US too, where you have the resources metadata getting stored. Whatever the move activity we are doing, the corresponding metadata will get either stored in East US2 or it will get stored in Northern Europe, right? So during the transit, all the metadata is completely secure and it will be getting stored and the storage is by default encrypted, and the data, whenever it is getting transferred over the internet, it uses transport layer security. HTTPS is what it will use for securely transferring the resources. And these are the different process that are involved when you are moving it. First, you need to select the resource, then you need to validate the dependency. For example, if you're moving a virtual machine, as I told you, there are a lot of dependent resources, right? You might have network interface card, public IP address, network security group, disk, and so on. So it will go and find all those validated dependencies, and there are two different scenarios, right? One, you might have to move the stateless resources. When I say stateless resources, for example, if you have a virtual network or a network security group, it will not get continuously getting updated. For example, if you're taking a virtual machine or a database, it will continuously be accessed and there will be changes happening very frequently. So those are all called stateful resources. We might have to consider replicating the resource first to the target region, and we might have to there will be a minor downtime involved when you're dealing with the stateful resource. But stateless resource, you can just use that particular ARM template to be deployed in the target region. So moving the resource which is stateless is much easier, whereas stateful resources, it might have some minimal downtime because you have to switch over from one region to another region, and the switchover might take some time. And when you are done with the movement, you can just go and either commit the movement, or you can also discard the movement at this point of time at step number 5, where if you don't want to go ahead and commit it, you can just discard it, so that the my movement will not happen. And once after the movement is successfully done, you can go and delete the source after validating the destination resources, functionalities, and features. Right, let's go and see that. So these are the steps that are involved. So currently the initiate move is pending for these resources. I can just click on initiate move, and then you can just initiate the move here, and it is validating the dependencies for initiating the movement. And once after it is checked, it will say whether so these are the different state that you will see when you are moving it. So if there is no issues, you just go and add the resource, you validate the dependencies, and when the dependencies are resolved, it will come to prepare pending status. That is what we saw just a minute back, and the preparation will be in progress. And even you can see the status here. So it will say initiate move pending, and if I refresh it, it will start showing like the things are in progress. So you will see the status like this. So there will be sometimes where the status will be in progress, and before we move it, it will be in pending state. And when the initiate move is in progress and complete, it will ask us whether you want to commit the move, and it will move to commit move pending status. So we will see this particular step in a minute here. So you can also move the virtual machines and so on. See, when you're moving a virtual machine, the important thing is it will go and replicate the OS disk, and it will have a complete clone of it. I'll show you how it looks like. So if I go to my resources here, if I go to all resources, just a second, I'll show all resources instead of all services. I have clicked the wrong one. So let me go to the menu and then select all resources. See here, few minutes back, what I did is I tried migrating or moving the resources of stan VM1 from East US to Central US. And as part of this movement, what it did is it took a complete clone of the entire disk from East US to Central US. You can see that it has created a complete replica of the OS disk in the destination region. So once after I commit the movement to Central US, you can just go and clean up the East US. So the data will always be there for your rollback, or if you want to go back to the source region, if there are some issues identified in the destination, you always have the option to go and roll back at any point of time until you commit it. So once you commit the movement, then you will not be able to do anything. You will have to delete the source, and see there are options here. So it says commit move pending. So there are certain resources like network interface, public IP, network security group that are showing ready for migration. So let's refresh. So in the interest of time, what I will do is I'll just uncheck this network interface. I'll just try to move the public IP address and network security group to start with. Let's see. Okay, I think all three are now ready. Okay, perfect. So I just saw the message here. So that's the reason I got to understand that all three are now commit move ready. So either you can discard the move if you don't want to continue with the movement, or if you want to commit it, you can just commit it. Then that means like the resources will just get moved from the current source location. So this stan management VM IP address and all these things are currently in where it is currently in the East US. You can see that it is also getting created in Central US. So it is moving the resources as we could see in the resources list. Currently, it is committing the movement. And once after you are done with moving the resources from the source to the destination, you can go and just delete the sources. You'll get an option here in the console itself, or if you want to go and delete it manually, you can also do it. So there are two options that you can undertake in order to do it. See, committed move for the 3 resources is now successfully completed. So it says delete source is pending. So if you want to delete that, you can just click on delete the source. So all the resources in the source location, source region, East US resources will get deleted. If I just type yes for the confirmation, and if I delete it, the source resources will get deleted. So it is as simple as that. So but if you're moving a resource which is having a lot of capacity, it will take some time. So in the interest of time, I just moved some of the resources as a demo. So if you want to move the entire storage or entire VM, so for case to case, you might have to use different tools. So if you are moving a VM, it will take few minutes for the movement to complete. If you are moving a storage, then I would prefer moving the storage data by using a storage mover or Azure copy, or there are many varieties of data migration option for migrating the data. So this tool is mainly for preferred for moving the resources that I have listed in this particular screen, where these are the resources that are more appropriate for moving using resource mover, including the disk storage can also be moved using resource mover, but these are the most commonly moved resources using this tool. So if you look at here, these are the different steps or stages involved when you are migrating the resource. First step is to go and get them added into the tool for movement, and the next step is to validate the dependencies of the resource that we are trying to move, and the next step is going to prepare. So there are two different resources type here: stateless resource and stateful resource. As I told you, Azure virtual machines and SQL databases, they are continuously being accessed, and you might have to replicate before you complete the movement. Whereas for the stateless resources, so like load balancer, network adapter, virtual network, network security group, so these are all resources which will not continuously get updated. So you will create it, configure it, and then very rarely you make changes. So you don't have to replicate those resources. You can just prepare the movement for those resources quickly. And yeah, you can take two different approaches for stateless resource and stateful resource. For stateless resource, typically like the move process deploys an imported template in the target region, and it will deploy the same kind of resource settings from the source. Whereas for the stateful resources, there is data involved in that, so it will have to replicate, and there is some downtime involved for your virtual machine and SQL database movement. And if you want to discard the move because of some reason, you want to roll back, you can just discard it. So the complete replication and the movement will get discarded. And if you want to commit the move, so it is the final step where you commit it, and the source resources will not be accessible because it will become stale after you commit the move. And if you want to delete the movement, delete the source after the moment, you can go and delete the source as we did just now. So these are the